Well, welcome everybody to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is the Stephen Travers version with Take 5. I'm Harper LaBelle. We want to welcome you to today's show. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer. Our founder, Vincent Turner, is also with us. And then Stephen Travers, who joins us as well here on our weekly Thursday shows. Guys, we start with obviously some bad news. I was expecting this show to have all four of our quarterfinal games done and us have the ability to comment on each and every one of them. But instead, there's only three that we get to talk about. In about 2.5 hours, the Georgia Bulldogs and Notre Dame will be playing in the Sugar Bowl for obvious reasons. If you're under a rock and haven't been aware, the game was postponed for a single day. The FBI and all of the state and local investigators in New Orleans have said, we want to put this game back another 24 hours, maybe move it to Thursday. I just think it's a technological nightmare to ask them to do that. So if you have the power of the NCAA, the Sugar Bowl itself, and obviously the bowl game and playoff format with the networks all involved, they're saying, no. We got people, they got planes, they got to catch. People have taken time off of work. They've got tickets, the band, the expense. So many things have gone into this. So I think against higher security's best wishes, they're going to play the game at 4 o'clock today. Stephen, let's begin with you. A lot has been going on there in New Orleans. Anything new that you've been finding out that is of interest that our listeners would obviously want to know more about as well?
Well, if this is a terrorist attack, and it obviously is, and the enemies are, let's call it Islamic Jihad, for lack of a better term, they look nothing more than for us to reschedule our football game, because they know they can't defeat us in battle. What they can do, and what they try to do, is to destroy our way of life and make us feel afraid. I really believe that somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan in 2001, Osama bin Laden watched the 2001 World Series between the Yankees and the Diamondbacks with Rudy Giuliani throwing out the first ball and capacity crowds having the time of their life, half an hour, 40-minute drive from the World Trade Center. I think that he realized right then and there, holy cow, you can't beat these guys. And so we're kind of giving them a victory. And it really seems to me that the job of the federal government and the police in New Orleans is to lock up that stadium, the New Orleans Superdome, and make sure that it's completely safe. Whether an event happened or not, you have to pretend that it did. You have to act as if it did in the way you deal with these crowds. And instead, maybe they know something I don't know, but we found out since then. I don't know whether they found out yesterday, but at some point we discovered, or they think, that the man did not have an accomplice. So that eases the minds probably of the fans at the game a little bit, because if he had an accomplice, possibly there was a second act to this event. But this kind of terrorist attack is very common. It happens all over the world. It's happened a lot recently. It's happened in Germany. And then a similar event happened in Las Vegas. And this was put out by Al-Qaeda or ISIS or somebody as far back as 2010, when they realized that a lot of their other more spectacular ways of getting at us were much too difficult to do. This is an easy way to cause a disruption and kill 9 or 10 people as well as yourself.
Vincent, initial comments. Obviously, the game itself becomes very minor in comparison to 15 souls that were lost and all the other things that are associated with it. Give me your thoughts.
Unfortunate, it's a tragic situation. My only thoughts are to the families of the victims. I think right now, as America and also as our country, we just need to pray for them, because these was innocent people that was killed. And that's my only concern, where our families are today. I'm so heartbroken for them. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, it's interesting in the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where you can take any actor and associate him with Kevin Bacon. The 7 degrees to me is Tiger Beck, who
Yeah.
is the football player from Princeton. He has a brother that's playing at Texas Christian. One of my teammates from Colorado State, his son is the quarterback there, Josh Hoover. My buddy Alex, that's his father. And so I texted him today, and Josh is heartbroken. The whole team, they're friends with the brother, and he's a teammate, and he may leave early to go into the NFL. So obviously, it affects people in many different ways. But there isn't any one loss that is greater or lesser than the other. But Logan, first and foremost, obviously a plea for the families, a plea for the city of New Orleans, obviously, as well. And then somehow or another tie this into the game.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a very shocking and tragic situation that happened, late at night, and was just I couldn't believe when I saw it in the morning when I woke up, because it happened around 3 a.m. and I woke up the next morning. I was like, oh my gosh, just like you said, just a very sad situation for everything involved. I did see that they're going to have obviously a ton of security at today's game. A quote from a superintendent for the New Orleans Police Department said that it's going to basically be as much security in place as it's going to be for the Super Bowl next month. So there's going to be a lot of security at the arena, at the stadium, rightfully so. And I don't think it's going to be a packed house, right? I think a lot of people that were in the area either left due to the situation, or maybe, like I said, there's travel plans and whatnot. So I don't think it's going to be quite a sellout today for today's game. Obviously, they had to change the time, as you mentioned. We didn't even know what time this game was going to be played until late last night when they officially announced it was going to be at 4 o'clock today. We didn't know if it was going to be 7:45 per original or what, but they are going to get the game going today. And like I said, it's going to be a very emotional day for not just the players on the field, having a tremendous game, hopefully, and can hopefully take their minds, in the fans' mind, off of everything that happened, but obviously for everyone involved, for the fans in the stadium, for the people punching tickets, for the people serving popcorn and beer. It's going to be just a very emotional day, right? And hopefully, we can start taking one step in terms of healing, in terms of all the tragedy that's happened. And it's just very unfortunate that this happened to start the new year.
Yeah, as I mentioned, guys, the networks, of course, college football itself, the NCAA, the coaches, the schools, the bands, everything that's a part of it. If this had happened in another city that wasn't hosting the game, I wonder if we'd have the same scrutiny. Obviously not. What if this guy, as crazy as he is, just decided at midnight, I'm going to mess somebody up. I'm not mad at the world. I don't know what his motivation was. Maybe he left a suicide letter. I'm not aware of anything like that. I'm just not. But in my opinion, at 3 o'clock in the morning, thank goodness it wasn't at 12:10 or 12:45, right? There would have been a lot more people. Maybe he was waiting for security and the amount of people to go down to where he felt comfortable doing this crazy thing in the first place. I don't know. Maybe time will tell, but the fact that it coincides, it's a mile away from where the stadium is on Bourbon Street, of course, in the French Quarter, and it affected everybody. So obviously the game itself will now become paramount. It certainly is for Notre Dame and for the University of Georgia, but the delays in doing this, especially for Georgia, they've had to sit and wait now for a couple of weeks. Notre Dame had the liberty of playing last week against Indiana. So we'll see how it turns out. In my opinion, guys, I think each and every one of the teams that got the week off looked a little bit rusty in the first half. I thought that Boise did. Arizona State had some troubles yesterday with it. I got to see. And then Oregon, it took late in the first half for them to get their first touchdown. And a team that, top 5 in scoring. I don't know if the week off or the bye is necessarily the best thing in the world, but it's kind of like in baseball, Stephen, when you get a first round bye, sometimes you go a week without seeing live pitching. It can affect you. Do you think that at all had any effect on the way the first 3 games played out?
Well, I had previously felt that well, I've said before that they played too many games. I think that affected Texas. I think Texas has played too many games. So whether they had, they just haven't had a lot of rest. So I think, I mean, regarding the Texas game, if you want to talk about that game, it was one of the most exciting and entertaining football games that I've ever seen. And I think I exchanged some social media commentary with Vincent saying that it reminded me of Boise and OU in 2006 or 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the Orange Bowl.
Fiesta.
It looked to me like Texas they had players who had been paid by gamblers to throw the game. That's how bad they played. That's how incredibly the mistakes were just monumental, right on down the line. And the look on Sarkisian's face as they were showing him on the sideline, I was thinking, and this is just a joke, but I was thinking, boy, he's going to be hitting the Jim Beam after this game, So and then he was spoken to after the game, and he said, well, we showed resilience, and they did. You have to hand it to them. But I really think that game was taken away from Arizona State when they reviewed a play and did not call a spearing. And it really looked like a spearing play, which would have given Arizona State really a chance to win the game at the end of the game. Of course, both teams had chances to win and blew it, but mostly Texas kept blowing it in ways that were very inventive, it really seemed to me. And then boy, who was happier than their kicker, who just, he was blowing left and he was blowing it right. Reminded me of, Florida State back in '91, or
wide right,
wide right, wide left. It was just not going through. There was no reason for it. They were playing in a dome in perfect conditions. But this also brings to mind something else, which I was rooting for, the Pac-12, because it doesn't exist anymore. But, that's the end of the Pac-12, and it, I was talking last week, hey, they're kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs in 1969 and the AFL overcoming the NFL just as they went out of existence. Well, that argument is down the tubes. The Pac-12 was not a truly competitive conference in the last years that it existed. And, now they're gone. Whatever they had, remnants of it are gone. And meanwhile, the Big Ten is obviously a powerhouse, and the SEC remains a great powerhouse. And so Georgia's going to have their chance to raise that SEC banner today.
Vincent, stay with the Texas-Arizona State game. Some interesting points there by Vincent. One thing that I'll make a quick comment on before we go to you, Vincent, is I texted a friend of mine who was watching the game with me. I said, it should be targeting, but it won't be because he didn't lower his crown. He hit him face to face. It was helmet to helmet. There's no doubt about that. That isn't in dispute, but I think they went to commercial, and then when he came back, they were ready to make the decision. But that's the one thing I hate to be wrong, and I hate to be right sometimes, because it doesn't matter. But he didn't lower his head. He didn't look down when he made contact. Otherwise, I would say, yeah, absolutely, that should have been one that would have made a huge difference. But Arizona State blew many of opportunities, and I mentioned it earlier. I don't know if they were rusty or not, but their first half, gosh, they were down, 17-3 at halftime, and they looked done. But my goodness, Vincent, did anybody look more like they've eaten bitter lemons than the Texas fans late in the third quarter all the way through the fourth?
What you're looking at was a football game that Clearly, Texas was the better team. There's no question about it. But you had an Arizona State team, like you said, Hop. They did like, from Texas standpoint, that, like Mr. Travers said, they had so many chances to put that game away. Clearly, to me, they was the better football team. But I said yesterday on our college football playoff show Monday, there's something in the water with Kenny Dillingham. Did I not say he from the 901? Did I not say he was a winner? Did I not say his team was going to quit? Remember this. And don't be ashamed, Mr. Travers, because Arizona State represented the Pac-12, because Arizona State was picked last in that conference. And I knew that they was going to play at a level. They just had to get in the game and keep plugging. And what can you say about the performance from Cam Scatterboot? Then, to me, the quarterback, Sam Leverett, kept them in the football game. They had a chance to win. Now, Texas, the one thing we say in Memphis, Tennessee, the pressure of the pipe. That field goal kicker, Bert Auburn, I think his name, he had a school record of what, 52 field goals in his career? But it just shows you that doesn't mean anything when the pressure is on the line. And as far as the call, I got to agree with you, Harp. I don't think it's really targeting. No disrespect to you, Mr. Travis, because he kind of hit him up in the chest. It could have been a bang-bang play. But I took it away from that Arizona State did represent the Big 12 and the Pac-12 from the days. And Deion Sanders sent over a tweet after the game to Kenny Dillingham. I'm proud of you, coach. Arizona State played well to win that football game down the stretch. It's a shame they lost. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me, and I'll mention this about the Boise game as well, is how much smaller those guys are, how much smaller Oregon was compared to Ohio State, how much smaller Boise was against Penn State. The traditional Big Ten powerhouses, and I'll throw Michigan in there as well. Gosh, they're enormous. All their guys are huge. Bama has some guys that are in that same build. Georgia has had some in the past, but I saw a size difference. I mean, it was visible for me on HDTV. I could tell every guy was 10, 20, 30 pounds lighter, smaller, especially in the secondary. Everyone looked like they were too skinny. Look at Ohio State's secondary. The guys are buff. They're
Right.
they look like they're ready to compete. But the talent is a little bit different there. You look at the recruiting aspects of it, Logan. There are a lot of great things that Arizona State did to fight and claw and scratch their way back into it. They just came this short. Is Texas to be criticized for allowing it to be that short, or is, hey, they played 14? This is now their 15th game. They're 13-2. Does Steven have some wind when he says, man, these guys are probably they can run out of gas at any point because they've been playing so long?
I mean, it kind of feels like it in that sense, Harper, because Texas, I mean, if you watch the first half, it was pretty much domination. Going into halftime, they were up 17-3. Then they added on. At one point, they were up 24-8 before Arizona State came alive in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, they had this game in the bag, but what did we see? We saw costly penalties. Texas had 10 penalties on the day. A bunch of false starts, a lot of pass interference calls. So, I mean, they just were not doing themselves any favors. Going back to the targeting call, when I watched, I was like, okay, yeah, they did go helmet to helmet, but like you mentioned, there was no targeting in terms of just he didn't lead with the crown. It was face mask to face mask. So I can kind of see why, but also see why Arizona State fans weren't happy about that. But we saw that in the end, what's the old adage of ball don't lie? And we saw where Mr. Auburn missed a field goal there, his first of two, I believe, in that game. So, but I mean, the main takeaway I had from this game with Texas and Arizona State, because I mean we brought up a lot of good names, but I think if you had to pick an MVP, it was Cam Scatterboot, a guy who early on didn't have a whole lot going for him. Right, he had a very slow start. You saw him; he was sick on the sideline, but he got it together. He figured it out, and he was an MVP. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns, 143 yards, 30 carries. He also had a passing touchdown as well. Pretty good throw all in all, I would say. But I mean, obviously he was the lifeblood of that team. Sam Levitt also, I think, had a good performance as well. But in the end, I mean, if you look at the stats, if you look at the numbers, I mean, Arizona State led in pretty much everything for the most part. Time of possession, total yards, for the most part. But it was just Texas. They found a way to win, right? And what I thought was the telling sign there for Texas was that final play in the second overtime. What I was watching the cameras didn't even catch that final 25-yard touchdown pass. They were late to it. That's how quick they ran on it, and that's how they got it. They got that upper hand because they were moving so quick. And if they hadn't, I don't know how this game would have went.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought that Quinn Ewers had a nice, some ups, some downs, but I think he proved himself and said, hey, look, I can help lead this team to get some big wins. But, man, if you were a Texas fan, I know people were sweating bullets watching that game yesterday because, man, it felt like you had it in the bag. It was going to be a blowout. But, like you said, credit to Gillingham and Scannaboo, the whole entire Sun Devil roster because they didn't back down without a fight, and they made, a tremendous Peach Bowl and made an all-time classic game out of it.
Stephen, you had some thoughts.
Yes. Well, I do agree with you upon retrospect that he did not lower his crown, even though the analyst indicated that he thought it was a spearing play. And certainly, I think if you're an Arizona State fan, you were hoping for it. That being said, that's a tough play to call. Number one, anyone who's ever played football, it's hard to avoid those plays. I mean, you're in the middle of a scrum and you're going to go head to head with someone, and it's quick action, and it's not always easy to avoid doing it. And to call it that play in a situation like that where the game is on the line, I think the referees have a desire to let them play the game. So in that respect, I think it might have been the better call. One other note here, and I've said this before, and I really think that they're going to have to change the concept of just letting all the conference champions get a bye in the first round because they haven't looked good. Now Oregon obviously earned it. They were the number one team in the nation, but they got a bye and then got smoked. And the other teams got byes, and some played better and some didn't. But, they did not prove that they deserved those byes. They're not the best teams. I mean, just like Vincent said, Arizona State, maybe they should have won that game, but they're not the better team. And you're right, Harper, Ohio State is physically dominant over Oregon. Oregon is a team that relies on speed more. And, the game is always going to be about size and strength.
Yeah. Anybody have any final thoughts before we move on? I have one that I was going to make regarding Texas, and it has nothing. Yes, I kind of teased because all the shots of the fans in the fourth quarter for Texas, just like I said, they'd been chewing on lemons, and they were as bitter and angry and upset and looking around like, what the heck is going on? This team isn't entertaining me right now. I'm not being delighted by the play. I think I'm a little upset. But one way out there in left field thought, is this the last for Cam Ewers? He's only a junior. Is Arch Manning stepping up, or is he going to transfer? Real quick, does anybody have any comment regarding that or anything before we close out the Texas and Arizona State game?
For my money, next season, the young man whose grandfather's from Drew, Mississippi, will be the starting quarterback for the University of Texas and Arch Manning. Bank on that. Put house money on that at Las Vegas.
All right, house money on Vegas. I get it. Where's Ewers go?
I think he goes to the pros. He's already in the
yeah.
They're already in the pros. We're looking at pro football. Okay, this is just a lower level of the NFL. These guys are getting paid, and again, like I say, do you want to put yourself through another 17-game season, risking injury next year? Let's go to the next level, make the real money in professional football, and give Arch Manning his shot. I think that's his way of thinking.
Well, let's go to the next game. And one of the things that I will say is I think that Dylan Gabriel went from being a first or second rounder to a fifth rounder, the way that he played in the game yesterday. Who would want that? He couldn't stay in the pocket. He scrambled everywhere. He couldn't make any completions down anywhere in the field, couldn't find anybody open. So if I'm a general manager of any of the NFL teams, I'm thinking, okay, let's see what we got here. I'm going to go, hey, I'm going to wait a year and I'm going to go for Will Howard. I'm going to wait for this kid from Ohio State to come out. He looked smooth. He looked confident. He looked impressive in so many different ways. And my goodness, 41 points in a quarterfinal game against the number one team in the nation. Could anyone be more impressed? Vincent, we'll start with you. Your thoughts here regarding Ohio State at 41, Oregon 21. What sticks out most to you from that game?
Like I said at the beginning of the year, there were some people that said this Ohio State team maybe been one of the greatest college football teams ever put together. And it was really saying that Ryan Day, since he'd been at Ohio State, this was his best team. Think of all the players that he's had: Justin Fields, Gary Wilson, Chris Avellay. But they said this team here was the best team they ever had. Now, Harper, we did a video this past week, and what did I say? Ohio State, leading into this game, 12 of their 22 starters among the top 100 in the 2025 NFL draft. Then on top of that, Jeremiah Smith, if he comes out in 2027, is the number 2 player in that draft. And then Caleb Downs, who you know, Harp, at Alabama last year, will be the number 3 player in the 2026 draft. Now, the only thing when you look before this game was how Ohio State lost to Michigan. That's what was sticking on my mind. But when they played Tennessee last week, clearly, out of all the teams left in this tournament, the Buckeye Nation got the best football team. I just think that they had something to prove. Will Howard, as you said, Hawk, been disrespected. Kansas State, the kid is about 6'5", 220. I think he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the nation. And everybody been talking about Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, but nobody mentioned this young man. He came out against Rocky Top last week, 41 points. Came out against Oregon. And see, when your quarterback comes out playing at a high level, your defense is going to play at a high level. It trickles down. Don't be so hard on Dylan Gabriel today, Hawk, because when you look at the Ohio State defense, Cody Simon, second rounder. Talik Williams, first rounder. Ty Hamilton, second rounder. Caleb Downs, maybe arguably, anybody want to argue with me today, the best safety in the country. Dylan Gabriel just went up against an Ohio State defense that remember what he did last time against them. Over 300 yards. They was motivated, the whole team. But I'm going to leave you at this. We know Cam Scottaboo did an outstanding job yesterday. And I heard a lot of people saying he was the best football player that day. But for my money, what really makes the Ohio State team go is that young man from Miami Gardens, Florida. Same hometown as from Andre Johnson, who just got voted in the Hall of Fame. In 2 games, this young man, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 22 yards of pop. And remember, Ohio State and Will Howard went to him early. To me, when you're talking about special football players, when you talk about unicorns, this guy at the wide receiver position is maybe one of the best I've seen in my 64 years. And if anyone want to argue with me today on the show, we can go at it. And you know what? When I was seeing him playing against Tennessee and then yesterday against Ohio State, it was like, it is the night. My body is weak. I'm on the run. No time to sleep. Ride like the wind. My boy Christopher Cross from San Antonio, Texas, the Alamo. Ohio State got the best team of anybody, brothers. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, they're certainly impressive. Size, speed, talent galore. They don't fit in their uniforms, man. They just they got muscles everywhere. On defense, Cody Simon had 11 tackles. Lathan Ramson had 7. Who am I looking for? There's one guy, I got my stats right here.
Jack Sawyer had an outstanding game. The defensive
Dude,
game.
wasn't he? Just knocking passes down and just getting in the way. And then you got 330-pound guys that no one can move. They've got one of everything. That's the thing. One of everything that you would want. Maybe the punter only hits at 42 yards instead of 45. But tell me where I'm wrong, Logan. They were so impressive yesterday. And more than anything, just like that, as soon as the referee blew the whistle, they said, turn it on, and they did, and Oregon didn't have an answer.
No, they didn't have an answer at all. I mean, look, when you come out the gate scoring 14 points in the first quarter, pitch a shutout, and then you go and you follow it up by scoring 20 in the second, you're doing something right. You're clicking. You're just on point. Your chemistry can't be beat. Vincent, to what you said last week, you said if Will Howard can perform like he did against Tennessee, then this is a very dangerous team who could very likely win it all. I mean, he pretty much just copy and pasted what he did against Tennessee, and then it did it against the number one team in the country. So respect to Will Howard, who's gotten some criticism this year. He outperformed Dylan Gabriel, a guy who's up for the Heisman. So he got the win in this matchup. But like you said, you can't say enough good things about Jeremiah Smith. 7 catches, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he's a freshman too. That's scary. If I'm guarding him for a couple more years, good luck. You might want to have your Wheaties before the game because it's going to be a long day. I mean, like he just did against the number one team in the country who hadn't lost a game to this point.
I'd like to say something else right quick.
Go right ahead.
He has NFL bloodlines. His first cousin is Geno Smith, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. And he had another first cousin that played at the University of Miami, Mel Bratton. So he comes from good stock. Back to you, Hart. Sorry.
That's fine. I mean, that's one of the things about the Buckeyes that I thought, everywhere you look, 5-star, not 4, not 3, 5-star guy, 5-star, best in the country. They are so loaded with ESPN talent. Logan, please continue. I know you had something else you wanted to mention. So,
I mean, when you're looking at the box score for this game, I just want to direct your attention to the Oregon rushing stats. You'll see 28 carries for negative 23 yards on the day, and that's because poor Dylan Gabriel just could not get comfortable, was running for his life. I mean, look, when you get 8 sacks against somebody, when your defense gets 13 tackles for loss, 9 passes defended, I mean, what can you do? I don't know. I know the O-line for Oregon was probably just they had oxygen tanks, they had Gatorade, they had anything on the sideline, but none of it helped. Ohio State just point blank period. They dominated the number one team in the country. Like I said, it's 41-21. Oregon tried to make a little bit of a comeback, but I mean, they had no chance. I mean, if you're Texas, I mean, look, if you compare the two teams, Texas, who was in a dogfight with Arizona State, took them to 2 overtimes. And then you compare that to what Ohio State did to the number one team in the country and a Heisman candidate. If I'm Texas, I'm a little scared right now. I ain't gonna lie. I am gonna be buried in the books this week, watching as much film as I can, because that was just pure domination from the Buckeyes and Ryan Day.
Well, so two things come to mind with that, Stephen, is first your thoughts on the actual game itself. Tell us where we're wrong in saying that, I'm not crowning them a champion yet. They still got 2 more games, but they still have 2 more games. You know what I mean? They could have shot the wad, so to speak, in terms of their talent level. I don't think they will. But you mentioned the fatigue factor with Texas. Does that become an issue? Second part of my question to you is you think that there's a portion of Texas that goes, man, we've played 15 games, they've played 14. This is really where we may be low on octane, and we've only got a week and a few days to get ready for this team.
Yeah, well, there are several points that I want to make, and I'll address that. But I'm not going to argue with Vincent. You're the football expert, and I'm not going to argue with Logan. He knows what he's talking about. I'm not going to argue with you either, Harper.
No, come on. Go ahead. You got to argue with somebody, so go ahead and fight with me.
I really agree all the way around. So I'm going to stay on this Ohio State-Texas game, but I'm going to veer just for a second to talk a little bit about redemption. Yesterday was a day of redemption for Ryan Day, for Coach Ryan Day,
Yep.
coach at Ohio State, and for his quarterback Will Howard, both of whom have taken a lot of heat from a very difficult Ohio State fan base on social media and anywhere else. So this was their day yesterday. Then getting back to something Logan said, you know, when you tackle a quarterback 8 times. Now I've outside of maybe the 8th grade, I really was never a quarterback, but I am a baseball pitcher and I know the psychology of athletics. And this is similar to, you know, coming out and they just are hitting home runs off you, or they're getting on the bases and they're stealing and they're constantly forcing you to look over to first base, look up back to second base, and not concentrating on the task at hand. And that was what happened to Dylan Gabriel. You know, he wasn't able to concentrate on his receivers, and he was just getting beat up. Now, I just wanted to quickly talk about Alabama and Michigan, and I'll just simply say that was another day of retribution, if you will, for Michigan. Finished their season on a very high note, having beaten Ohio State and Alabama. And they beat USC, Ohio State, Alabama in a single season. I don't care what you say. In any given season, that's a hell of an accomplishment. Alabama, on the other hand, really tough day for their coach. I don't know what they're saying back there, but that's going to be a tough one. Now, we had talked previously about the 1974 USC-Alabama game, and I was watching this game yesterday, and I was thinking about that game because there were parallels. Ohio State gets off to a 31-0 lead, and then just at the end of the second quarter, at the end of the first half, Oregon manages to score. Then they make a 2-point conversion. They make it 31-8. They're going to get the ball to start the second half, and then they score. And so there is this feeling. Anyone who's ever watched that USC Notre Dame game, when they're seeing a game like that, it hits them in the back of their head. Could this be another game like this? And then Ohio State just turned on the Jets and made that a complete impossibility, which tells us, Harper, how incredible it was that 1974 day that USC was able to do this. Not just that they were able to score, but completely stop the other team from scoring. And Oregon was completely unable to do that. Next, and we were talking about these concepts of are you getting enough rest? Who should get the bye in the first round? And it occurs to me that college football is now entering a new paradigm. And it's very similar to the paradigm that you see in baseball, in which, let's say, Billy Beane builds the Oakland A's to be a regular season champion, but they are not built to be a postseason champion. And this is what we're going to see now. This is why Ohio State, with 20, as Vincent said, 22 of the 100 best players in the country, according to whatever services are saying that. And for every one of those 22 players, there's 3 guys in the who aren't playing. They're not starting. So they're bigger and they're stronger. They're also more loaded. And when you get to this point in the season, injuries really play a huge factor. And, you know, you see a lot of teams in college football who will have a nice start, okay? Maybe Miami this year, just to give you an example. They got off to a really good start, and then they sort of tailed at the end of the year. Now, I don't know how many injuries they absorb, but every team has injuries. So a team that is built with strength to absorb injuries and to replace players, or they're strong enough to withstand injuries, that's the team that's going to be stronger, and that's Ohio State. They are built for postseason play. And yes, they lost to Michigan, and of course they wanted to beat Michigan badly, but you know what? They were looking ahead to the playoffs. They knew they were going to be in the playoffs, and now they are. And they're just like a team that maybe didn't have the best regular season, but is going to, in baseball or pro football, and jets it on into the postseason, because that's the new paradigm. Call it Moneyball or call it whatever you want to call it. But coaches are going to have to recruit with the concept of a 17-game season, and not just their starters, but who it can replace their starters or relieve their starters and give them enough depth to last 16 or 17 games all the way to the end. So right now, my prediction is the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Well, that's if you had told me that after the Oregon loss in the middle of the season, I'd go, you don't know what you're talking about. But you certainly do now. The proof's in the pudding, guys. It's as simple as what you saw. Gosh, every one of those guys, they look big, they look fast, they look strong, they're playing well, they're moving people out of the way, they're blocking, they're tackling, they're covering on defense. So many things that were impressive. I'm going to ask this question to all three of you. My son Brian and I were watching the game, and he says at one point, he goes, how on earth could they lose to Michigan? Why do you think the social media, which, by the way, Will Howard, young man, here's what you say when somebody who's never even picked up a football and worn a helmet is telling you that you aren't any good. Tell them, screw you. I'm sorry. Screw you. I'm the quarterback. I had a bad game. Big deal. Big deal. I had a bad game. We're playing for the national championship, and we're 2 wins away from getting it. Don't do this, folks. Don't send anything out on social media if you're going to criticize your players or your team. If it were a Michigan fan, I can deal with that. But if you're an Ohio State fan and you're criticizing your team, gosh, shut up. Stop it. Forever. Just stop it. But the social media that's mad at Ryan Day, well, why didn't they play like this? Well, maybe the team just needed something like that to motivate them. And boy, are they motivated. I know they didn't want to lose to Michigan. The way that they played yesterday, they should have beaten Michigan by 45 points. Right? They were ahead 34-0 before halftime against the number one team in the nation. Absolute dominance. But the question that I ask you is, will Ryan Day be able to manufacture whatever it is in his pep talk throughout the week, through, as Logan, you said, getting in the books, looking at film? Does he have 2 more in him, or is it going to be more self-motivated from the players going, we got this? Which of the two do you think comes into play a little bit more?
Me?
Go ahead, Vincent.
Hey, every now and then your team is going to play your rival, and they're not going to play good football. Over the years, teams have lost games to their rival, and hey, it's just it. Ohio State just had a bad football game against Michigan. But remember this, when you push somebody in a corner, and Ohio State has a tremendous fan base, they're very, very serious about their football. Going all the way back to the days, look at their coach, Woody Hayes, how energy he had. Look at the 6-day super sophomores. This is a state that believes Buckeye Nation. So I never really looked at them losing to Michigan and all that. I was surprised at fan base, but I understand because, again, this football team, you could put them in the rims of the 72 Trojans. I'm sorry, Mr. Travers. You could put them in the rims of the 94 Cornhuskers or the Oklahoma teams on the Bears Switzer. This is one of the most talented football teams out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you push people in that corner and they want to prove you wrong. Right now, I'm taking everything and putting it on them Buckeyes because I'm going to say it again, 12 out of 22 starters in the top 100. And think about this, since we're talking about the offensive line. Josh Simmons, who's rated one of the top 2 tackles in the draft, he didn't even play. He's injured. So this is a Buckeye team that's got a lot of depth at every position. And when I saw what they did against Tennessee, and then you got to give kudos to Chip Kelly because he's taken his scheming up to another level. But I say when you got a special player and Chris Carter, they interviewed him yesterday on the Big Ten Network. He said, let me tell you this, put respect on Buckeye Nation. Because Jeremiah Smith, oh, Lord, I love that football player. When I saw he went to work on Tennessee, and then what he did against Oregon, I'm going to tell you this. Texas Steve Sarkisian, your defensive coordinator, I hope you don't put your corners out there on the island. Buckeye Nation, sometimes you can kind of upset the wrong people. Ryan Day and them are motivated. And let me tell you something. They could have easily put 60 on Tennessee. They could have easily put 60 on Oregon. Even though Texas is playing in Jerry House next week. In the state of Texas, Austin is 2.5 hours from Dallas. I don't care if you have every Texas fan in the house. The Buckeyes are coming and taking names. And Lord have mercy, I hope they come to Atlanta, because then I'm going to see Buckeye Nation go take over Buckhead. Don't get mad. I'm riding with the Buckeyes. Back to you, Hart.
Well, very interesting commentary there, of course. Just confirming what we already know. Logan, next with you. Ryan Day, if he had lost, and I know they weren't even close to it, is he going to lose his job? Is that how? Because here's why I ask this. We got to see what he has. I don't think there's anyone on the shelf that has been up there that is still in wrapping paper and has a bow on him. He's unleashed everybody. And where do you stop the team? What a talented group of guys. Who wouldn't be in this position right now with the talent that he has?
I mean, it seems just like all momentum is on their side, right? They're hitting their stride, that their chemistry, they're lock in step. That they're rolling right now. What more can you say? They got the dominant win over Tennessee. They put up over 40 points, and then you saw just yesterday they put up over 40 points against the top team in the nation. So they're doing something right. If it's we're staying in the film room an extra 5 minutes. If it's get an extra pep talk from the coach, I don't know what it is, but they are probably the most dangerous team left in this playoff as we come back to the Final Four here soon. I wouldn't want to be the Texas Longhorns because if I seen what these guys have done in the last couple of weeks, I don't know what the answer would be. I know one thing, though, for Texas is that they got to get their running game figured out if they want a shot at it. They struggled in their running game against Arizona State. They have to get something figured out, or else I think the Ohio State defense, the D-line, the safeties, the linebackers are just going to eat up Quinn Ewers. Because we've seen against Georgia, look back at it, if Quinn Ewers gets consistent pressure, he tends to make mistakes. In Ohio State, they've just got a boatload of guys who can apply pressure to that Texas team. So you got to get your running game figured out. You struggled mightily against Arizona State. You have to do better against Ohio State if you want a shot at winning and advancing to the championship.
Well, interesting comments there. Appreciate that. And Stephen, one more time back to you real quick. Ryan Day's group, we've gone on for a little while, but there's a reason to do that. The impression that they have. But Ryan Day himself and the pressure from the social media and from the boosters and everybody, how could you not win against Michigan with what you have? And you showed us yesterday what you've got. How would you lose that game?
Well, I think all of you are making really smart points. Vincent, you were talking about the depth, which we've talked about. That is absolutely essential at this point in the season. I made the point. You made the point. And Logan, you had earlier talked about Texas better spend a lot of time in the film room. I'm not sure they want to spend a lot of time in the film room. They could get psyched out in that film room. And then I'm going to say one other thing. Vincent, you're absolutely right. I've seen a lot of college football. And what I saw yesterday was as good a performance in a major bowl game as any football team that I've ever seen in college. That includes the 72 or 2004 Trojans or the 94-95 Cornhuskers or Miami in any of their bowl games or any of the great all-time great teams. And so we're talking about Ohio State and Harper. You're saying, and I'm not disagreeing, this might be the greatest and Vincent's also saying this. This might be the greatest college football team of all time, and they have 2 losses. So this says something to what I said earlier. This is the Moneyball era. This is a new paradigm and a new approach. You can lose to Michigan. You can lose a game. You can be the 1989 49ers. They lost the game. They didn't go undefeated, but they're one of the greatest pro football teams of all time. So this is pro football. This is not college football anymore. This is basically the pros, and the playoffs are just like the pros. And so you have to approach with a holistic, long season, long approach. And so in this respect, Ryan Day, I think this is what he did. I think this is what he planned. No, he didn't want to lose to the Wolverines, but the Yankees don't want to lose to the Red Sox either. But, the season goes on. And at the end of the year, if you win the World Series, that's what counts. So Ohio State, if they win, they go all the way. That's what counts. And as far as I'm concerned, Day has shown his team to be ready to go in the postseason. And even if something did happen and they lose, and I don't think they're going to, but, no one can know the future, Day is not going to lose his job. He is one of the best coaches in college football. He's obviously one of the greatest recruiters, and that's what you have.
Yeah, how much of that is just him and his personality, smile on his face and a pen in his hand to get you to sign, and how much of that is, oh, by the way, there's a check in the other room that you just go initial that, and then the bank, we've got a bank in the building now to take care of all your financial needs. Here's an interesting perspective that I'm going to throw at you. I got two things I want to say. One is in particular to some of these games that we've had. You're looking at the screen, guys. Maybe not so much Clemson, but is Tennessee, is SMU, is Indiana, should they even have been there in the first place? I mentioned at the outset of the show, does that extra week off, does it affect Arizona State, Oregon, Boise? It certainly, in my opinion, could be a question mark that we won't ever know. The teams that played the previous week all seemed to dominate, especially early on, and it took a little while for the others to get ready. It'll be interesting to see if Notre Dame starts out hot and very aggressive and does everything in their running game against Georgia in a way that the Bulldogs aren't quite ready for. But we'll know more about that in a couple hours. My other point was, what a blowout. And that Kirk Herbstreit took about every 20 minutes to stop the show and talk about the weather outside and how beautiful the San Gabriel Mountains. I counted at least three times where he stopped the game to tell, like, the camera, oh, go look. And they went to a shot of either the sunset or the blimp.
Fantasy Island.
It was amazing to me. I mean, if it were a close game, I don't think he'd be talking about it as much. However, for him to notice it and to put it on the air, it certainly must have been impressive. I noticed there was one view. I've been to a Rose Bowl. I understand it. Lived in that area my whole life. So there are certain sunsets where I've never seen a purple that looks like that one, or the orange or the yellows in the horizon. It didn't, no different in that game. All right, well, let's go from beautiful weather outside to inside in a dome. And in Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl, I mentioned, Penn State kind of dominated as much as you would expect a big, strong, physical team. The first thing that stuck out in my mind, and Logan, we'll begin with you, the first thing I noticed, even on HD television, is every Penn State guy on the offensive defensive line was 6'4" and taller, and every guy on Boise State was about 6'3" and shorter. It was a size difference that was all around. Penn State dominate there, and Ashton Jeanty, bless him, the Southern term is bless your heart. That poor kid, he couldn't find a hole. There wasn't anything for him. It seemed like there was always an extra defender from Penn State that was in his way, ready to stop him.
I mean, they just had a brick wall on the defensive line, Harper. I mean, you mentioned they got guys who were 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 280, 300-something pounds. I mean, they have some units on that D-line, and they held Ashton Jeanty to his worst performance of the season. He had 30 carries, 104 yards. He only averaged 3.5 yards per rush, and, man, he was just struggling the whole time. He couldn't find a hole, like you said. Anytime that it looked like there might be a little bit of daylight, that two guys would come by and just swallow him right up. He couldn't get anything going for him. So, I mean, obviously we said going into this matchup that, yes, he is the number one target. He is the number one guy. You have to stuff him, and that's exactly what they did. They stopped the star player. Now, once you get that going, once you say, okay, the running game's not working, then you got to start relying a little bit more on your passing game. And Boise State, unfortunately for Maddox Natson, just did not have a great performance. 304 yards, yes, that looks nice, but he had 3 interceptions. So, you say, okay, he's got the nice yardage, but he did have 3 turnovers in the ball game. And that was just, sometimes you have to force a pass just to try and get a third down conversion or whatnot, or sometimes it was just a bad throw. But Boise State just could not get an answer for Penn State. But I was very impressed with the Nittany Lion running game of Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Both of those guys, they looked really sharp. They were just, they looked fantastic. And Drew Aller, I thought, had a really good performance as well. 13 to 25, 3 touchdowns, 171 yards. That's what you need. Look, he isn't a guy that's going to necessarily throw for 350 yards. He's not going to be someone that's going to chuck it for, 50 yards on the regular. But he's a guy that I look at as like a game manager, right? He can get you those plays if you need him to. But he is someone who is elevated by the people around him, by his receivers, by his running backs, and everyone did their job. Tyler Warren, we've talked about before on the show. He was voted the best tight end in the country. I mean, he had that one catch in the end zone where he just got over that poor defender of Boise State and just jumped right over him. So, that, like you said, I think the talent level for Penn State, the 5-star guys, as you alluded to earlier, Harper, the 4-star guys, they were just too much for Boise State. And like you said, it's a Southern saying, but bless your heart. The Broncos, they did their best, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. But also, too, going back to Ashton Jeanty, he fumbled twice in that ball game. He only fumbled twice the whole season prior to that game. So It was just a catastrophe for the Broncos all in all. But I was very impressed with Penn State coming away from that game. I thought that they looked great.
Yeah, after their game against SMU, and no disrespect to UNLV or Colorado State or Nevada or anyone else in the Mountain West, but Penn State's defense, when you look across man for man, even their safety is bigger than your tight end, in most respects. Mm-hmm. The size difference, I thought it was very difficult. Maddox Matson, they were teasing that he's not 6 feet. He's 5'11", and he's a smaller guy. And he looked it next to these guys. Very impressed with Penn State. They were smooth. They got off to a great start. Maybe not the same start that Ohio State got off to, but, pretty doggone similar. It was 14-0. And 17-3 at the half. Stephen, maybe not as much love as we give to Ohio State, but the Nittany Lions came to play. Their size difference, everything about them says just what you were mentioning a few moments ago, where they're built for the postseason.
Yeah. So I said that Ryan Day, he had some redemption. I don't know that James Franklin needed redemption. But he is a great coach, and he's done a tremendous job with Penn State. Okay, now Boise State, I'm looking at this quarterfinals, and I'm seeing blue blood college football programs up and down the line, and then I see Boise State. And you're talking, Harper, you're looking at it from a football player's perspective. You're looking at it the way an actual football player, college player, Division I, a pro, standing on the sideline, looks across the way and sees the other team. You see something nobody else sees. You see our guys are an inch taller. Our guys are 20 pounds, 30 pounds heavier. The average fan might not even really notice that. I have a friend, Kevin McCormick. He never played football in his life. He sees this. He just has an eye for, looking at interior line football. And that's exactly what happened. Boise was in over their head, and let's face it, they're Boise State. They're a nice program. It's great. We like to root for them, but you're in with all these blue blood programs, and it's too much. So, God bless them. They got as far as they could expect to go. Next, I just want to say that the faculty, not the faculty, but the trustees at Penn State University really ought to think seriously about buying some property in Arizona, because if anybody performs well in Arizona, it is Penn State University. They are 8-0 in the Fiesta Bowl. I can go back to watching them dismantle a very good Trojan team with Marcus Allen in the Fiesta Bowl. That was the very first really big Fiesta Bowl that was played on New Year's Day. The Fiesta Bowl had previously been kind of a secondary bowl that Arizona State played in when they were in the Western Athletic Conference.
Yep.
And then it became elevated to a New Year's Day bowl because Phoenix really rose and became a big American city. It's one of the most growing cities, and it's a city that can really throw a party. And then it reminds me also of one of probably the most memorable Fiesta Bowl ever, which was, again, Penn State against Miami in 1986-87, when Miami came out with Jerome Brown and Vinny Testaverde, the Heisman winner, and they were supposed to win big. And Joe Paterno's team laid a whooping on Miami and got an upset and won a national title. I believe that was Paterno's second. So anytime they're playing in Arizona, whether it's in Tempe or Glendale, Penn State comes to play, and I think their fans really enjoy going out there. It's one of the great cities to have a fun time in. I can assure you I've done the research. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Have you researched it personally and gone there maybe for a New Year's Eve party or two, and still have tickets, but maybe want to sell them because you might have had too much champagne the night before, Stephen?
My experience in the Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale area goes all the way back to being a minor league baseball player with the Oakland Athletics in 1982. And I was there, a month and a half. So I had plenty of time to sample the joys of that area. It's grown a lot since then. And I had a spectacular spring. I think I threw 12 or 13 scoreless innings with a strikeout an inning. So it was a fun spring. And my friend, as I mentioned earlier, Kevin McCormick, he had a condominium in Scottsdale. So I would take many a poor man's vacation and stay at Kevin's condo in Scottsdale. And Scottsdale is just it's an amazing town. Let's just say that. Maybe I'm giving away secrets and telling too many people about it, but I think a lot of people already know. A lot of people go back there for spring training, and that's mainly what I've been back there for, is to go to spring trainings. And I was there also for the World Series when the Diamondbacks played the Yankees in 2001. So it's a fun state, a fun city.
Yeah, well, I think, and Vincent, you'll appreciate this, the history that you bring up in terms of the Fiesta Bowl itself. What I liked about it in terms of the early days and just trying to compete with the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl or the Liberty Bowl or the Independence Bowl or some of these other ones, is that they had a ready-made stadium, the weather, and obviously really good games. And they got a nice crowd that shows up. They supported the game no matter who was playing. There were locals that went to say, well, we'll buy those extra seats, and who knows what's going to come from this. And so it was a worthwhile bowl, and I think they're in the loop now forever. You've got the Rose, the Orange, the Sugar, and the Orange Bowl, and the Cotton Bowl will be the semifinal games. In Atlanta now, New Orleans has always had great bowl games that they've been able to brag about. So all kinds of interesting little perspectives in terms of the history of college football. But before we turn to that, Vincent, your thoughts here on the Boise-Penn State game?
Of course, Penn State had the better team. I would say this, Mr. Tyler Warren, like Logan said, you get the stamp of being the best tight end in the country. Them 2 catches he made in that game from a touchdown perspective, that's NFL royalty. That's a good football player. We did NFL, I think, special on him early in the year, didn't we not, Harp? And you said, Harp, that this guy continuously keep playing, especially, I think, against USC, Mr. Travers. He had like 14 receptions this year in the game, right? But this guy's a very special football player. We know Penn State was going to have a hell of a running game. They had, 216 yards rushing. There was a bigger team, but I want to say this to Boise State as I look in the camera. I'm proud of y'all. They were still in the game. Now, Hop, on our college football playoff special, what player we said, and you even said it had to have a special game. We know Ashton Gente was going to be keyed on. The young man from American Fork, Utah, Maddox Madison.
Maddox Madison. Yep.
Like you said, Logan, 3 interceptions. But remember this, Boise State had got that game back to 17-14. Then Penn State scored a touchdown to go up 24-14. Boise State on their ensuing possession drove down the field. They had a penalty. It was 3rd and 17. All they had to do to me was just run the ball and take the points. You still in the game. What do Mr. Madison do? He throws an out that hung, and Penn State, I can't think of the safety, intercepted the ball, and to me, that was the ball game. He didn't play well enough. He didn't make plays in the passing game, and we talked about that. We said that he had to make plays in the passing game. As far as Ashton Gente, my opinion doesn't change on him. He still had over 100 yards on 30 carries, and it was a tough 130 yards. The head coach at Boise State, Spencer Donaldson, you did an outstanding job. Boise State competed in that game. And think about this. Even though Penn State won 31-14, the field goal kicker missed 2 field goals, makeable field goals. You take 6 points off the board, how much that changed the game. To the team with the blue turf, much respect to you today. Back to you, Hop.
Yeah, I just thought it was my 3-star guys against your 4 and 5-star guys, and you guys just had more in every facet of it. You were just bigger, faster, stronger. We fought you with everything we had once we got going, but it was just it was just a debacle for them. It turned out the way that it did, and you can see for a number of reasons at Boise State, happy to be there. Glad that they got it. I don't know if it'll affect their recruiting. I just don't. I know that I looked at it a couple days ago. They had, I believe it was 19 3-stars that they have. Maybe some transfers come in, but everyone else is getting 4 and 5 stars that are at that level. So Boise still has a way to go, but you can't be disappointed. There's a step in the ladder, and you got to take one step at a time before you get to the top. And Boise, in my opinion, did a great job of getting to another step. Who knows if they get asked? They're already going to be in the pack when that reissues itself with a bunch of Mountain West teams. But we'll see how the reconfiguration of schools and the location and rivalries get back to where they used to be, and how that takes place in the next couple of years. But for right now, 31-14 was the final there. All right, guys, before we wrap it up, we didn't get a chance to talk about either Notre Dame or Georgia. They'll be playing in a little more than an hour right now. Just give a basic impression of what you think in terms of what you're going to be looking for and what has impressed you from either of those two teams. Logan, we'll start with you.
Well, for Georgia, I think for me, it's how is Gunnar Stockton going to do? I mean, this is a big game for him. We know Carson Beck's done for the year. He's going into the draft. Best of luck to him there. But let's see how the young guy from Raven County can do in his first full-time start against a tough defense. If Georgia can get a good amount of points on the board by halftime, that'll lead me to believe where they're at, right? If they can at least put up a solid fight up till halftime, I think that would help just me personally see how this team's going to do, because we know, I said it earlier in the week, I think that Kirby Smart's the best coach at second half adjustments. If the team is down, he'll find something, he'll say something in the locker room to get his team back on track and come out and fighting in the second half. So that's what I'll be looking for that team. And as for Notre Dame, I'm looking forward to just seeing how their defense is going to do. You're going up against a guy who doesn't have a lot of game film in terms of college stats, but we know how good Notre Dame has been. We know all the great players, all the big-time plays they can make, but can their offense rise to the task also? We know with Notre Dame that they're definitely a defense-first type of ball club, I believe. Their offense is kind of the second fiddle. Can their running game get something going? We know Jeremiah Love had a big game against Indiana, but it was really just one big rush he had. That was the bulk of his yards for the day. So how can he do? But also, how is Riley Leonard going to do? We know we've talked about him before. We say he's a good quarterback. Well, this is your chance to maybe elevate your draft stock and see just how better you can be in a quarterfinal game. This is a good team. This is a great, led by a great coach. And this would be a statement win for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame to beat Kirby Smart, to beat Georgia, who's been a dynasty over the last handful of years. So this is a big game for both programs. For Georgia, you have the uncertainty factor of your quarterback, but you have a lot of good players. The wide receivers, they have to haul in the catches. They can't be dropping passes like they've done in the regular season. So they have to be on point. You have to play almost a perfect game if you're Georgia, just because you don't know what to expect out of Gunnar Stockton. And for Notre Dame, my final thoughts are your defense has to come to play like they've done time and time again. Let's see what you're made of.
Stephen, the defense for Notre Dame is number 2 in the nation right now. They give up 13.8 points a game, but is the factor that they played against a weaker than normal SC team, Army, Navy, Stanford, Louisville, Purdue, Northern Illinois beats them, but they've been on fire ever since. What impresses you most about Notre Dame and their turnaround since that loss to the Huskies?
Well, the simple, like you say, on its face, to turn it around after losing to Northern Illinois and then pick your team up and keep your guys with their heads up to play the rest of the season as well as they have. And again, this is going to get back to the question of, should you play that first round or not? Who is better off? Now, I was extremely impressed with Georgia in their victory over Texas in the SEC championship game, because I thought Texas outplayed them, but Georgia refused to lose. So that tells me a lot. I normally would pick Georgia in this game, but they don't have Carson Beck. They're starting a quarterback who we don't know what to expect. I do know from the athlete's perspective, and I've said this before, when you get that chance, you want that chance. You want to show what I can do, and that might just give Gunnar Stockton the opportunity he's been looking for to say, hey, I'm good enough to play on the national stage. But we also know that Notre Dame played in the first round and Georgia did not. Now, Georgia fought Texas hard, really, so they wouldn't have to play in that first round. And any coach will always say, I would rather have the time. They would really not. Any coach ahead of time will say, I don't want to play that first round, any sport. And yet we see time and time again, as Harper, you've mentioned, the team that plays that first round, somehow it looks like they've got flow that goes into the game. And then the team that didn't play, like Arizona State yesterday, and then obviously Oregon, sometimes they look like, well, maybe they should have played that first round. So I just don't know what to say about that. I think the coaches always will say, I want that extra week to prepare and to have players be fresher and recover from injuries. But again, as when you get into these playoffs, the new paradigm is the schedule, the team with the bigger players and the deeper roster is built for this postseason. So in that respect, I think Georgia's going to be able to show if that's who they are, because is their second string quarterback good enough to replace their first string guy without a lot of kickback?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Well, Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson certainly have to bow down to Gunnar Stockton in terms of records that they had here in the state of Georgia that Gunnar broke when he was in high school. But this isn't a high school game. Obviously, this is a much bigger play-in with everything that went about with obviously with the attack. It'd be interesting to see how he comes out of this. But Vincent, my question to you is, Notre Dame is built to run the ball. They're number 11 in the country. And if you take out Army and Navy and a couple of the other teams that, just run the ball exclusively, if you remove them, then Notre Dame is built for that. They're not built to pass. And the other way around for Georgia, Georgia can pass the ball pretty well, but they can't run the ball very well at all. Will either of those factors be a part of today's game?
Of course. You take Notre Dame. Coming into this game, Jeremiah Love had, over 108 yards rushing, but he had one play that he went 94 yards on. I'm going to say this to Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman. Very impressive win over Indiana, but you're not playing Indiana. A guys that got 16 transfers and 3 stars. This is the Georgia Bulldogs. And the right Logan,
that's it.
5 stars. And the right Hart, 5 stars. Talent through their lineup. Line of scrimmage solid. Even though Georgia hasn't played a solid game this year, think about this, gentlemen. They've had injuries. They have problems at the quarterback position. But one thing Kirby Smart has done is Mr. Stephen Travers said, ST, when you recruit at a high level, it don't matter. Next man up. And as you said, Hop, Gunnar Stockton, everybody worrying about Gunnar Stockton. But Hop, I'm so glad that you brought up Deshaun Watson. And what's the other gentleman you brought up? Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence, yeah.
And don't forget Tua Tagovailoa.
Yes, sir.
Chance.
But Gunnar Stockton had over 14,000 yards total in high school from Rayburn County. And he'd been waiting. And Nick Saban wanted him. So I'm not worrying about that aspect. What I think the keys to the game, like Logan said, the quarterbacks who have a better game. Number 2, the running backs. Trevor Etienne is now healthy for Georgia. The offensive line is healthy for Georgia. Number 3, defensively. Now, Gunnar Stockton brings something to the table that Carson Beck can't do. He can run the ball. He puts pressure on your defense. Because Al Golden, since Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, go back to Notre Dame, they love to bring the pressure. They love the blitz. Look what they did in the Indiana game against Curtis Roy, because they know he was a statue of liberty. He couldn't move in the pocket. This is a different guy in Gunnar Stockton. To make a long story short, I'm going with the Dogs. We live here in the Metro Atlanta area. No disrespect to you, Mr. Travers, Mr. LaBelle, and Mr. Landers. Georgia has the best coach right now in college football. He's played in these games. His team is going to be ready. It's going to be a hell of a football game. Going to be close, though. But I think Georgia is not like Indiana. Notre Dame, you're not playing 3 stars and 16 transfers in Kurt Sagetti. You're playing a guy that's been here, done that, and a guy that's on fire right now. And a lot of NFL teams want him. The mic has dropped. Back to you, Mr. Harper LaBelle.
All right. Well, we're going to close today's show with, I'm just going to ask each of you a simple question. So far, and we've seen 7 of the 8 playoff games, what has either impressed you or what do you still need to see in order to go, I think they may have gotten it right in terms of the 12 teams instead of the 4? Logan, begin with you. Just real quick, what are your initial thoughts here so far? We got 1 game to play before we get into the semifinals.
My thoughts just on the 12 teams we've seen, I think that Ohio State has by far been the most dominant on both ends of the ball. And I think right now they're like, to steal a phrase from it, that they're playing with house money right now with how good they're playing on both ends. So I've been impressed by them. But I was also, I got to tip my hat to Arizona State with how well they played yesterday. The comeback they made, just a little bit too short, but we've seen some good football in the quarterfinals, that's for sure.
Vincent, I'm going to go with you next.
Hey, I think it's been an outstanding college football playoff so far, going to 12 teams. I think it's exciting for the nation going forward. I'd like to see them move up to 16. That's the performances, but the Ohio State Buckeyes. They bring me back to the memories of the 72 Trojans, the 94-95 Nebraska Cornhuskers. And you know, Mr. Harp, we did a video on Archie Griffin this week. All I can say that I'm putting my money on the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I'm going to say this as I leave today here on College Football Playoffs. And Harp, you know it's coming. O-H-I-O. Ohio. Ohio. Ohio Buckeye Nation.
All right, Stephen, I'm going to ask you to try to outdo that. Your thoughts initially on the 12-team playoff, pluses, minuses. What type of grade do you give it?
As a fan, an absolute plus. As a college football fan, incredibly entertaining, riveting, and very enjoyable. I'd love to see more of my favorite teams in it. That's what really interests me the most. But I'm drawn in by these teams that I don't have rooting interests in, and yet, in the course of playing 4 games, you develop rooting interests. You see a player, you see a coach, and you're seeing him enough that you develop some affinity for them. So right now, my affinity is with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I completely agree with Vincent. They are really one of the most impressive teams I've ever seen. And there's really no question at this point, the Pac-12, they're gone, but, I thought maybe they could make a showing. Didn't happen. With all due respect to the Big 12 or anybody else, the Southeastern Conference is the best conference in college football. It has been really probably since the 80s, and it still is. But the Big 12 is really making a move to possibly establish some dominance, and I think we're going to see these two conferences really be heavyweights against each other for years to come. Whether it's Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, those teams are going to be strong teams that are going to be in this. Penn State, I want to add, will be in this for years to come, and maybe USC will get there. Right now, I don't have a lot of. Apparently, that guy Bill Cowherd, he predicts USC to make the finals next year. I don't know what he's talking about. I haven't seen any big recruiting payoffs, and they've lost some people in the portal, and I just not sure what to say about their coach. But let's forget about the Trojans right now. What I'm seeing here is this is real college football. This is smash mouth, Big Ten, man-on-man size and speed and future NFL quality football teams. And it's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to say you were this close to being sacrilegious. You're not saying that you're rooting for Ohio State as much as you're saying, from what I've seen, they've got the best team that's out on the field. For a Trojan to say that Ohio State, that would be, that's worse than kissing your sister right there. So you
I've always, even though I have a rooting interest, I have always been fair about, what I see, talking, whether it's as a historian, well, what does it say? Author, historian, journalist. That's, so I've always been fair in analyzing these teams. I remember when we lost to Texas in the 2006 Rose Bowl, and I told the guy next to me, I said, "You guys earned it." And he was a Texas fan. You said you guys earned it, and you're the best team because you beat the best, and so that's what we're seeing right here. So.
Yeah, and when it's this obvious, I mean, you're just stating the truth, and you're stating the obvious, obviously, because they're good.
I would lose any sort of, people aren't going to believe me if I was saying something else, because the truth is really obvious. The SEC and the Big Ten are the two best conferences and have the best teams and the best players. It's just the way
I'm going to try to not say that word anymore. I just said it at least 3 times. You need to. It's clear as day. Let's just put it that way. All right. Well, for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for Vincent Turner, our co-host and founder, this is our Take 5 with Stephen Travers. And Stephen, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We want to thank you for tuning in, everybody, and enjoying 100 Yards of Football. Another episode of the College Football Playoff Show has just terminated, and it's obvious to me that I'm not going to use that word anymore today. I'm just not going to do it. So have a great day, everybody.